2 billion cups of coffee are consumed every day, so it's by far the most popular psychoactive substance on earth. But most people don't think much about what it's doing in their body when they drink a cup of coffee. Is it actually good for me? Is it bad for me? Will it help a workout? Will it hinder a workout? Is it affecting my sleep in the end? So I poured over a lot of research in the last several weeks, just to going through clinical trials, going through meta-analyses, just so you don't have to. So I'm gonna give you a real science-based, evidence-based verdict in the end. Is coffee net positive or is it net negative? And just to add a little bit of context, also subscribe to HealthMaxAbroad, please, and hit the notifications. That helps out a lot.
God damn, Jimmy, this some serious gourmet shit. Me and Vincent would have been satisfied with some freeze-dried Taster's Choice, right? And he brings this serious gourmet shit on.
But with the context of myself, and a lot of this is going to be anecdotal, but I drank coffee for a long time and really enjoyed black coffee, got to where I like cafe latte with coconut milk, and really valued it in the mornings, and always loved the taste, just everything goes in, drink a cup of coffee, I enjoyed. But, so I understand, really people get very protective about their coffee and their morning routine, so don't feel as if I'm trying to invade that. It's all very individualized. But I stopped drinking coffee about 3 weeks ago, just as an experiment, really, and I moved around a little bit where it wasn't, no, actually, I'm sorry, 3 months ago I stopped drinking coffee. But the first 3 weeks, I really felt a real drag. I mean, I was dragging, really lethargic, and it took me a while to get over it. And I was surprised at the level of lethargy I was feeling, that I was really that dependent on the caffeine physically. But in the aftermath of that, I've been feeling really good. And I feel like my sleep quality has improved a great deal. Really sleeping well. I'm like a dead man when I hit that pillow at night. I wake up and it's light. So I don't get up at all, but it's been really great in that regard. And again, it's anecdotal evidence on my part, and I want to present that as well, because coffee is a very polarizing topic, and we have to look really on two sides of the coin, I think, when we dissect this argument. And think of yourself through this lens, that think if you're really good with your health, if you're in good metabolic health, as you can judge it, then I think a whole different set of circumstances, outcomes here really apply to you. If you are somewhat compromised from a health standpoint, then it's a different look, it's a different argument, so to speak. And we'll be able to differentiate that as we go through, but that's a key thing to think about. But in no way am I gonna try to put my individual, and a lot of the research I've done was for myself, but just to make a determination for myself. And I might go back to drinking coffee, or I might integrate it in a way that I'm gonna line out here in the end. But think about it in those terms, especially your current health status, and we'll make that differentiation as we go through. But let's start off with the mechanism. What is caffeine doing? And caffeine is what they call a molecular mimicker. It's really almost identical to a compound known as adenosine that's produced in your brain. And it's produced and it accumulates throughout a day, and it really signals fatigue. And it builds up in your body as you should be preparing for sleep at night. It builds up in reserve. And the longer you're awake, the more adenosine you're going to build up within the adenosine receptors in your brain. And those receptors that adenosine binds to, those are the exact same receptors that the caffeine molecule binds to. And caffeine is known as, it's a competitive antagonist to those adenosine receptors. And so when you drink coffee, caffeine is just fitting in those receptors, and then adenosine is out by the side waiting to get its receptors back, so to speak, to wait to find a home. And then when you block that adenosine and then the caffeine wears off, that adenosine does find a home, and you get this tired signal, and you get that afternoon crash. That's when a lot of people reach for that, I don't know, fourth, fifth cup, maybe a second cup, whatever it is, to try to get through the rest of the afternoon. But in a way we're going to describe here, you're sort of wrecking yourself later. And what they found also is your body does adapt its adenosine receptor production after 5 to 7 days. With people who had never had coffee or maybe been off of coffee for a while, they found that their brains made as much as 30% more adenosine receptors in that time frame. So you start to get this, you're starting to adjust, you're starting to normalize, and it's not really what they would call in the clinical sense an addiction, but it is a dependence. As I said, it's a very physical dependence. There was a study published in Psychopharmacology. They found that even moderate caffeine consumers, 2 to 3 cups a day, they're going to show measurable withdrawal symptoms within 24 hours, which I think I found that myself, but it didn't dawn on me till later that's what it was. But you start to get, when you have abstinence of 24 hours from caffeine, you get headaches, you get irritability, of course, and you get the fatigue big time. And so that this tolerance, it builds up fast, and your brain's adjusting fast. There's a dynamic relationship going on there, and you're making more receptors, and the caffeine's coming in. Your body's constantly trying to regulate. And does that itself really implicate coffee as being bad? Well, not necessarily, really. It just means more understanding what's going on in the brain and withdrawal symptoms that are going to come about, but not going to cast any aspersions on coffee in that regard. But another way we can look at it that could be deleterious to your health is how it affects your cortisol. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone in your body, so it's your body's alarm clock. But after just drinking 250 milligrams of caffeine, like 2 to 3 cups, the NIH, they did a study, they found you get a cortisol bump by as much as 50% within an hour. So really dose dependent, really big bump you get within such a short period of time. And it gets more interesting when they found that after 5 days of daily intake, the morning cortisol spike reduces significantly. So your body's building up this partial tolerance within a short period of time. But it's affecting your body's own natural waking processes, your own body's own alarm clock. But think about it too, as I mentioned, if you feel like you need to get another burst later in the afternoon, say a 2 p.m. coffee, your cortisol is going to get raised again. It's going to stay elevated into the evening, they found. So it should be dropping when you get ready for sleep. You're bringing another bump out to wake you up again, your body's own bump. So your body's not figuring out exactly what's going on throughout the day. And then they found, this is an NIH study, that caffeine consumed after 12 p.m. consistently elevates cortisol into the 5 to 7 window. That 5-7 hours later, you're getting still elevated cortisol, and that's really directly impacting your sleep. Not only because you might fall asleep fine, they found, but it's really the sleep quality that suffers when they look deeper at your brain waves and the amount of sleep you're getting. And they found that also that if you don't get to sleep by 10 o'clock in a lot of cases, a lot of different studies have confirmed that sleep between 10 and 2 o'clock is so valuable that those hours between 10 and 2, they're worth 3 hours of sleep after 2 o'clock. So that's the time you got to be getting to sleep, is 10 o'clock if you can, 10, 11 o'clock max. But the coffee's going to interfere with that, and the cortisol is going to interfere with it ultimately. And then there's another deeper layer that when you do wake up and you get that cortisol, your body spikes, pulses cortisol as soon as you wake up. And it lasts for 60 to 90 minutes. So it doesn't attenuate at least for 60 minutes. But you're messing with your body's own built-in alarm clock. And not only does it get you up, but it gets you ready for the entire day. So everything's can be sluggish if you start too early with coffee. So when you pour it immediately after waking, you're really putting the stress-inducing compound on top of your stress hormone. And as I'm going to show you in a minute, it's going to create this synergistic cortisol effect that's going to have a lot of downstream effects you're not going to want. And those downstream effects include elevated blood sugar, suppressed immune function, and then increased the abdominal storage fat. And especially even increasing visceral fat, the fat around your organs, that's even more dangerous to your health. You get more visceral fat, more abdominal fat storage when that cortisol really raises up. But if you just wait that 60 to 90 minutes, let that cortisol attenuate, for that natural cortisol to spike and go, that you're going to actually also get the full energizing effects of coffee, of caffeine, when you really need it, when you're drinking the coffee to stay alert, focused. It's going to have more impact. That tolerance isn't going to get in the way, that cortisol tolerance in the morning. So that's going to be one of the key things we look at, is try to wait for the first 60 to 90 minutes, at least 60. But if you can go 90, I think it's even better to be safe. Another aspect of it, if you do drink coffee and you're under stress, there's a study out of University of Oklahoma that found that caffeine combined with mental stress produces this synergistic cortisol release that I talked about, where higher than each of them could achieve on alone, this synergism pushes it much higher. You're getting more than double what you would get from them. So you're getting even harder hit by cortisol when you combine them too early. And that's the takeaway, is you got to get away from that early morning, especially waking coffee. And then there's the fat burning aspect. We know caffeine is marketed as a fat burner, a metabolism booster, and it is, technically it is. It does induce lipolysis, breakdown of fat cells. But And it does that by stimulating the sympathetic nervous system, by stimulating adrenaline, norepinephrine, dopamine, these different neurotransmitters. But the real actual research shows that the effect, it's acute, it's not a chronic effect. That you might burn an extra 80 to 150 calories in that time frame. But when you look at it over a 24-hour period, when you look at baseline versus 24 hours for a person that didn't versus did drink coffee, that effect over 24 hours is negligible. It's almost the same effect overall with fat burning. But what I think is a real genuine benefit with coffee, and it's proven out in the data, that you consume it before exercise, you're going to get a boost in performance, and you are going to get more fat oxidation. You're going to use those fatty acids for fuel. And there also was a study in a publication known as Sports Medicine that found that you get a 3 to 5% endurance boost from caffeine as well before the workout, before a run, potentially. And then if it can make a difference. 3 to 5% doesn't seem like much, but if you're trying to shave a second or two off a run time or whatever the case is, just a little bit of extra margin on something, it can help a lot. So I do believe in the pre-workout benefits of caffeine. I do believe that's actually a real positive. But if you're drinking it on the couch or you're drinking it stressed, then it's a totally different compound almost. Then we got to look at the net negative from the caffeine. And then there's another part of this equation that you have to think about is just the way you brew the coffee and really the interaction with plastic throughout that process. That if you're using a plastic coffee maker, you're using one of those single serve pods, or even the paper cups that get lined with polyethylene that you get at the coffee shop, that coffee's leaching that polyethylene, those microplastics, into your cup. And you know those microplastics, they're xenoestrogens. They mimic estrogen, and they're endocrine disruptors. So you got to stay away from any way you interact with coffee and plastic. Keep them apart. If you go to a coffee shop, as I said in an earlier short I did, try to take in a stainless steel ceramic cup, because it's really dangerous, especially for a man, is testosterone production. When you start putting more estrogen into the equation, it's never a good idea. So, or any endocrine burden on top of man or woman is not a good idea. But as I said, get a glass, get a stainless steel ceramic cup, and then you definitely want to use the unbleached paper filters. That's one thing that's easy to fix, that there's no reason not to. But they did find that those filters can help actually, and this is something some of you may be more concerned about than others, maybe even myself, but that it does play a role in LDL cholesterol, that it raises LDL cholesterol. So a number of little things can add up there, but very important in the end. And in the end, another question a lot of people might ask is coffee actually, is it making me, am I going to live longer drinking coffee, or am I going to live less time? Is my longevity going to be affected? Is coffee killing me, or is it keeping me alive in the end? So they did a research to that end at Oregon State, and it was a couple decades of research, huge cohort. I think it was 500,000 plus people were involved in this study. But they looked at 3 to 4 cups of filtered coffee a day, and it was consistently associated with as much as a 30% lower risk of Parkinson's disease. So a huge finding. And Parkinson's, we know it's mediated by the adenosine A2A receptor antagonism. So that same mechanism that keeps you awake also protects you and your dopaminergic neurons in the end. So that's a huge finding, and it was, say, very, very much a validated study. They also found a 25% lower risk of type 2 diabetes. Now, I don't know the exact makeup of all these participants, their health status exactly. I forgot to really glean that was actually talked about, but they do know the chlorogenic acids in coffee improve insulin sensitivity, glucose metabolism, and I also like about coffee, it has a good amount of chromium, magnesium, which are also healthy for your pancreas, helping it regulate blood sugar more effectively. And I think the biggest takeaway from the study was they found a reduced all-cause mortality from all the 500,000 people they segmented in the coffee drinkers versus the non-coffee drinkers. The coffee drinkers had a 12% lower risk of death from all causes versus the non-coffee drinkers. I think that's a very significant number, and I think that really puts a big net positive on coffee overall. And then they looked at one other catch that is involved sometimes, that when you do drink as I mentioned, those unbleached coffee filters you need. But if you do unfiltered coffee, you go even beyond that with a French press, Turkish espresso, you're getting these substances called caffestrol or caffestol and coeol. They're 2 diterpenes. They found they can raise LDL cholesterol. not by huge amounts, it raised it by almost 12 milligrams per deciliter versus the filter coffee people, they had 3.6 rise. So if you're worried about cholesterol, LDL, then that's something to think about. More of a need to get to the filtered coffee in the end. And then also, one key thing to think about is something I've actually seen anecdotally is genetics matter. There's an enzyme, it's called, there's a gene called the CYP1A2 gene specifically. But it determines how fast you metabolize coffee. Because I've known guys that can have a cup of coffee at 10, 11 o'clock at night and feel like they're not affected. Now, one guy I did know say that he felt like he wasn't sleeping well. I thought to myself, well, maybe it's that coffee drink. But he's been drinking coffee like that his entire family, all his life. So it's maybe hard to make that conclusion strictly from the coffee drinking. But they think that as many people as 40% of the population in general, they're slow metabolizers. So another thing to think about how quickly you metabolize, because I think they've concluded that the half-life of coffee, caffeine, is 10 to 12 hours. But you also have to think about a little bit further downstream, the quarter life. If the quarter life is, say, going to be another 6 hours, then you've got to think that through. You still have a quarter of the caffeine circulating, get close to bedtime, and that adenosine has not had a chance to inhabit those other 25% of your receptors, your adenosine receptors. It's definitely going to affect your sleep, and I think that's why it gets the effect on the quality of sleep as well. So you got to think about the way in which you metabolize, how you metabolize, and what time you gotta stop. And then, so coffee's effects are going to last longer for those people. And they also found that their blood pressure goes up even more. It's more elevated from the stress inducing response. So in the end, we think about all these different factors. We're going to blow them up a little bit more in a few shorts to give you more clarity on this. So what do you think? Is it a net positive or is it a net negative in the end, just in terms of yourself, anecdotally? I know where I'm leaning. I'm going to share it here shortly, but objectively, sort of from the data we looked at here, the different studies, I would conclude personally that if you're a healthy person, you can drink 3 cups of filtered coffee a day. You stop by early afternoon. I think the data speaks pretty clearly that it is a net positive. And that surprises me a bit going in, especially with how good I felt being off caffeine. But I think in the end, when you look at everything that's involved, it is a net positive coffee. But it has to be managed the right way. It's a tool, so to speak. And you have to manage and time it the right way. But just when you look at the disease prevention alone, the data is really strong. So that alone, I think, makes it a really strong net positive. And just that all-cause mortality data is really strong. And then the ergogenic benefits are real with the fat burning, the fatty acid mobilization. So yeah, I would think of it as a tool. It's not necessarily a free pass if you think in those terms, but the benefits, they do depend, I think, entirely on how you use this tool and the way you deploy it. So I want to just lay out some guidelines here, just a few guidelines. I think if you abide by these guidelines, you ensure that coffee is a real net positive for you in your life, your long-term health, your longevity even. So number one, I think it's that you got to wait 60 to 90 minutes. I'd go closer to 90, but go at least an hour after you wake up. Before that, you have that first cup. Let the cortisol attenuate. Let it do its job. Let it wake you up. Don't interfere with this natural process. Also, don't interfere with your nervous system. And then also, you have to think about, you're really dehydrated after you wake up. You haven't had anything to drink all night. Coffee is a natural diuretic, and so you really don't want to wake up and just start drinking something that's diuretic. You get up and have some water. I like to have warm water with apple cider vinegar with a little bit of lemon, cinnamon, and sea salt. That's the way I start off, and I try to drink a lot of water to get going, to get hydrated again. So I'd say don't interfere with that either by drinking coffee. That's gonna be a further debt you have to overcome later. And then they would say drink it filtered, especially if you're concerned about the LDL-raising compounds in there, those substances I mentioned, Cortisol, Caffeine, I think I'm forgetting that. And then use, as I said, use that stainless steel, that glass cup. Stay away from plastic altogether. That's a must. And then stop drinking. I'd say, even if you're a fast metabolizer, stop drinking by 1 p.m. Give your cortisol time to attenuate, to get out of your body. Give that adenosine time to build up. And you ought to be really looking as soon as you wake up to what's going to make for a good night's sleep tonight. What time do I want to be in bed, I think, by 10 o'clock. A lot of studies shown that if you get to sleep by 10, the sleep from 10 to 2 is worth 3 hours of sleep after 2. It's so valuable. And all that slow wave sleep, all that slow brain wave sleep, that's what I mean when I say that, but slow brainwave sleep that happens early on, where most of the repair processes are happening within your brain. All your lymphatics are getting cleaned out at that time. Let that happen. Get to sleep early by 10 o'clock if you can, but let that coffee get out of your system. As I said, you got to think about the quarter life, not just the half life. So be done by 1, even if you're fast metabolizer. If you're a slow metabolizer, yeah, man, I'd be done by 10:30 drinking coffee. Just have a couple hours of a window there to drink it. And then in the end, also say, I like to drink it black. Maybe black's a little too harsh, but if you can go black, but minimal additives, don't use the creamers, of course, they have a lot of really bad substances within those creamers these days. But maybe coconut milk. If you want to do a cafe latte, I always like coconut milk. I stay away from that oat milk, which is really a polysaccharide that can really raise the blood sugar. And like I said, if you know your genetics, how fast you metabolize, and then especially if you do have anxiety, you have hypertension, you have GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. If you have a problem with acid, coffee is very acidic. You have to be careful there. So just know the status again of your health, your mental health, but your physical health. And if you're stressed, again, you don't want to pour this coffee on top, but you have to manage it in a way where you can have it later, have maybe lesser amount, but not have it also later in the afternoon. So all this really changes the calculus. So in the end, here we are. What's really the net negative or positive? What's the verdict? I have to say, if you're in moderately to good health, it's a net positive. The coffee has real effects, real benefits. There are 2 sides to it. There are some drawbacks that you just have to watch out for. If you're compromised in many ways, you can still manage it, I think, and timing it the right way. I think that mitigates a lot of the issues with coffee. Timing it the right way, shortening the window in which you drink it. But overall, I gotta say, it's a net positive. For me, it's a bit of a surprise that I arrived at a net positive just in terms of how it felt being off coffee. But again, that's strictly anecdotal. I reserve the right to drink coffee again. I really miss it sometimes. But it's a net positive, and I'm gonna blow it up further in a few shorts that you ought to watch that go deeper in on the hormones, the science. But if you want to optimize your health, don't cut coffee out, just optimize really the way you drink it. I think that's the key. If you want to optimize health, optimize the way you drink it. That in the end, that's the name of the game. And when you condense it down, it's filtered before noon without sugar in a ceramic cup. Those are kind of the 4 pillars. You can modify those a little bit, but those are the 4 to take away. And your body's it's gonna thank you in the end. Your health's gonna thank you in the end. And you're gonna be thanking your health for a lot longer. As I said, with more longevity, you're gonna be able to enjoy yourself for longer and feel good doing it. So if you found it useful, like I said, subscribe to HealthMaxAbroad. Tune in for a lot more. And then let me know in the comments how you drink your coffee, if you're gonna drink coffee again, or maybe you're gonna stop for a while and see how you feel. But anything you gain from this, please let me know, and it'd be great to know it. We will see you in the next one. Look forward to it. Thanks.